Welcome to California in Focus. I'm David Mastio, and today we're talking about California's new $20 minimum wage for fast food restaurants. Joining me today is Kenneth Schrupp, California reporter for the Center Square. Kenneth, tell me what's going on.
California's $20 an hour fast food minimum wage went into effect on April 1st, and business owners are saying this effectively creates a new statewide minimum wage because of the size of the fast food industry and its visibility. Businesses say that as they struggle with rising costs, it's hard for them to compete with large corporate fast food franchises for workers.
I thought that California had made an exemption for Panera and a whole bunch of other exemptions for unionized sectors of the fast food industry. Is that not the case?
The fast food industry exemptions were very limited and, as said, only really affected workers that are already unionized. This wage does not cover the rest of California's employees. However, there is a pending ballot measure that voters will have the chance to vote on in November that would raise the statewide minimum wage to $18 an hour. But from what I've heard from small businesses, it effectively already is $20 an hour, because why would you work somewhere for $16 an hour like Governor Gavin Newsom's Plum Jack Cafe is paying some people, when you know you can work at a fast food place for $20 an hour.
Kenneth, tell me who you talked to for this story.
I talked to two folks. One of them was the California executive director of the National Federation of Independent Business, John Kabatek. This is an organization that represents small businesses nationwide. The other is the California Restaurant Association's vice president. And what they're telling me is that these other restaurants, restaurants especially, were hit hard during the pandemic. As we remember, when you have people ordering from the delivery apps take like a third to half of that money, so you're left with even smaller margins. And a lot of these restaurants are barely breaking even right now, if they're lucky to. And this estimated cost of $250,000 a restaurant from the new wage hike is just something a lot of businesses can't afford, and people are shutting down. John told me about, there's this one member that he has in West Hollywood. When they raised their minimum wage to $19.08 last summer, one of his members cut his staff from 50 to 30 and even rolled out a more limited menu. But he was still forced to close his doors in February because he just couldn't afford to stay open.
And it's not just going to be other restaurants facing competition from this $20 an hour minimum wage. Why would you work at a Quick Trip or a 7-Eleven when you could go work at McDonald's for $20 an hour, $4 or $5 an hour more than you're making at Quick Trip or 7-Eleven, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're working a minimum wage job, it's often just to get some basic work experience or just get paid. And if you're doing it for the money, of course, you're going to go for the place that pays you more.
One of the things you mentioned in an early version of your story that I might have cut out for space was the consequences of the high housing costs in California for this. Can you explain that?
Yes. This state has some of the highest housing costs in the country, and is probably obvious to most. If you build fewer houses, the cost of other houses will go up so long if demand were to stay the same. California's population has nearly tripled since the 1970s, when we significantly slowed down the construction of housing. So, of course, housing is going to get more expensive here. Permitting for housing declined 45% in 2023 compared to 2022. So that just means a couple of years down the line, and the pipeline of buildings being built, you're just going to see half as many new buildings. And that just means rent is going to get more expensive. There's this illustrative example I included in the story. Let's imagine you're the busser working at Newsom's Plum Jack Cafe for $16 an hour. That's in a town where the median rent is $3,200 a month. So let's just say you were going to put half of your earnings into your rent. This is someone who's that would be someone who's extremely rent burdened, right? They would have to work 400 hours a month at $16 an hour. That's over 100 hours. That's 100 hours a week. Typical person works a 40-hour work week, right? To afford putting half of your money into rent. That's something that is quite difficult to do. Now, if you look at other states, you can easily, not easily, but you can afford rent on minimum wage in some places. But there's really a push and pull here where some people want to raise the wages to come up to the high cost of housing. Fewer are saying, well, we need to build more housing so that we can reduce costs overall in the economy. Because when you do raise the minimum wage, you increase the cost of really most goods and services. What we've seen is automation increase in fast food in California, major price increases, and mass layoffs. So it does not seem like it is delivering the promised benefits for workers.
What's the other side of the argument, Kenneth?
Well, the costs of living are extremely high in California. Housing is incredibly expensive. Energy is expensive. Food's expensive. You name it, California is going to have one of the most expensive whatever in the nation. And by raising wages a few dollars an hour, that can really add a lot to a person's sense of earnings, income, and stability in their lives. Those extra couple $100s a month in some cases could really make the difference between making a car payment or not being able to get to work anymore.
But that assumes that prices for everything stay the same.
That would be the assumption. That does not tend to be the case.
Is there also an element in this that the fast food industry is made up primarily of really big players that can absorb this kind of a cost, while the companies that were granted exemptions to this, the small mom and pop places that only have a few locations, they don't have the deep pockets to absorb these cost increases?
Yeah, that's exactly what the California Restaurant Association Vice President Megan Gamble told me. If you have a gigantic corporation that's worth billions of dollars, of course they can find the extra cash to pay their workers. And something worth noting is that some of these larger companies are typically the ones calling for higher minimum wages because it will wipe out their competition, these smaller restaurants. In 2019, Walmart's CEO went to Congress and demanded that they raise the national minimum wage, with small business owners saying, doubling the minimum wage is going to increase expenses, lead to layoffs, and shutter businesses. Walmart likes it. Walmart maybe doesn't like paying higher wages, but what they like a lot is having less competition.
In Nebraska, they've recently passed a major increase in the minimum wage, and there they've seen even the drive-throughs go AI. Is that still an opportunity for companies to get even more automated than they are in California?
More likely than not, yes. We're going to have to see what the Fast Food Council comes out with. If push comes to shove, I do expect automation to be adopted by these large fast food companies. There are fully automated restaurants now operating. There's one in Los Angeles where you order electronically and out comes a burger. There's no people involved.
With no people. Amazing.
And it's not exactly a cheap burger either. It's not like the costs you're actually really generating any cost savings for the consumer, because what are they going to do? Lower prices? No. Let's look at Waymo, the autonomous taxi service that Google operates. It rolled out through most of Los Angeles. And looking at prices, it seems like it costs more than a Lyft or an Uber. So if automation delivered on the promise of lower costs for consumers, we would expect lower prices, but that's just not the case.
Kenneth, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
Are you tired of news that puts politics over people? At the nonprofit Franklin News Foundation, we believe in putting people over politics by delivering nonpartisan news and audio content that serves you, the American taxpayer. With Franklin News Foundation, you can read fact-based, state-focused news for free at thecentersquare.com. You can listen to civil, balanced conversations between policy experts through our podcast network at americastalking.com. Or you can get in-depth news on K-12 education spending, curriculum, and school safety at chalkboardnews.com. It's all free through Franklin, where we put you, the American taxpayer, first in every story, episode, and conversation. and it's only possible through our supporters. Together, we can produce content that puts people over politics and brings Americans the news they deserve. Become a supporter today at franklinnews.org/donate. Once again, that's franklinnews.org/donate.